We are, Nicole, doing what I have called committing superpower suicide.
Explain that.
Well, until a year ago, the United States was unquestionably the world's leading superpower. And among our greatest strengths were not only our economy, but our national security, our defense, our development assistance, our diplomacy, and our greatest asset, arguably, on top of the traditional hard power assets, was our network of alliances and partnerships, which is what China and Russia have long envied. No matter how powerful China becomes, no matter how aggressive Russia becomes, neither of them have ever had in Europe and Asia the network of alliances and partnerships that the United States has enjoyed and nurtured since World War II. It is, in many ways, our superpower. And what Trump has done methodically is to undermine and deconstruct the strength of those alliances. What holds those alliances together are shared values and trust. Mm-hmm. And trust has been broken.
We're back with Director Brennan, Michael, and Rick. So, Rick, I interviewed Susan Rice today for my podcast. It'll be out later this week. But this idea, she just perfectly articulates how dramatic it is. Superpower suicide.
It is dramatic. I do agree with everything she said. But I want to come to Mark Carney's speech there, which I think is the most important speech by a world leader in the last decade. Because he Because he addresses these issues. And he said, and it's painful, it'll be painful for John to hear, it'll be painful for Mike to hear. He said, never ever use the term rules-based world order again, because it doesn't really exist. He said there was always a lie at the heart of it, which was that superpowers didn't really have to obey the rules. Russia didn't, China didn't. It was kept whole by U.S. power, U.S. dominance, U.S. values. But now when you have the U.S. committing suicide and not following those rules-based orders, we need a new system. He really went right at it, I think, in a way of saying that old system was riddled with hypocrisy. Donald Trump, in a way, has exposed the hypocrisy by being such a malevolent actor himself, and now we need a new system. So one of the things that he was saying is that all of these countries need to be much more independent and not rely on that globalized trading order that we always were a champion of. What did Mark Carney do this past week? He signed a bilateral trade agreement with China for electric cars. That hurts the U.S. He's saying people have to make their own agreements. They have to band together because they have plenty of power. The EU is our largest trading partner. We do $1 trillion of trade with them a year. They have huge bargaining power. That hurts American consumers. So when Trump inflicts a tariff, inflicts it on them, it's inflicted on us, right? Because, as the Wall Street Journal said, 96% of the cost is paid by U.S. consumers. Yeah. Like, they're not using their leverage. And Carney was saying that, this transatlantic alliance that Susan was talking about, that we're so proud of, that has kept the peace for 80 years, he's saying it doesn't really exist anymore. When you have an actor who's the head of the alliance who's threatening to attack another NATO territory. So he said he basically exploded this whole mythology.
I mean, let me play a little bit of it.
Oh, okay, good.
Let me play a little bit, Carney.
But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination. The multilateral institutions on which the middle powers have relied, the WTO, the UN, the COP, the architecture, the very architecture of collective problem solving are under threat.
I mean, along with collective problem solving comes intelligence sharing, military training. I mean, it comes with a lot of other things that are, if not by treaty or law, by practice, the things that make us safer. He seems to be saying all that is at risk.
I think it is. I mean, and part of it is because of this economic calculation where he said that integration has become a tool of subordination for the superpowers. I mean, nobody has really quite said it like that. He also said something beautiful, which is nostalgia is not a strategy. I feel like so many of us, of the rule-based global order folks,
the norms,
we are nostalgic for it. But nostalgia isn't a policy. And so much of what we want to do is kind of, remake the souffle. He's saying that we're not going to be able to remake the souffle. It's going to be different. And we will never have as malevolent a president as Donald Trump ever again, knock on wood, but it's never going to be the same.
It's such an important point, and I feel like in the domestic space, people like Mark Elias get us there, that there's no snapping back, DOJ. We're not going to return to a norm. We'll create a new norm. But what was before Trump is no more. Director Brennan, how does that impact things that aren't as public, the very opaque world of intelligence gathering and national security?
Well, it's a tremendous impact. And to pick up on Rick's point, what's so ironic is that international global architecture that Trump is so insulting of and dismissive of, the United States has benefited more than any other country since World War II as a result of that international global architecture. And we have these intelligence relationships around the globe that help our national security. We have developed them over time. I worked very closely with the Danes and all of the various NATO country intelligence and security services. And they relied heavily on us, but we relied heavily on them as well. And again, the devastating impact on the trust that these countries have now in the United States, that they see the United States pursuing policies that are solely in U.S. interests and are detrimental to others, it really does undermine the respect, the trust that these countries and these services have had toward the United States. So again, Donald Trump will one day leave the political stage. But the impact on what is happening to our relationships, particularly to our NATO alliance, the alliance that really has kept the United States and European countries and the world safe over the last 75 years or so, the impact, I think, is going to be so long lasting that it's unfortunate that Donald Trump has had the opportunity to do this, and which is going to be felt across the political, military, intelligence, and security spheres.
Michael Crowley, let me quickly ask you about news that the Times had that Gavin Newsom says he was blocked from entering a U.S. pavilion and giving a scheduled speech. What do you know about that?
Well, I wasn't part of that story, Nicole, but, look, the presidential campaign is already underway. Gavin Newsom, in some ways, is very shrewd about making headlines and drawing attention to himself as a very combative rival of President Trump. Some people love that. I think some people think it's a little too much. To the degree that President Trump had anything to do with that, the Trump administration had something to do with keeping him out. That would be in keeping with I think, disturbing trend we're seeing to, restricting access to events that normally were more open, and there's more political control, not just in our country, but around the world. So that would be distressing. But I would say that, there are some Democrats like Newsom who think that you have to fight President Trump in unconventional ways, and some of them are looking to be the next president. And so I think we'll see more of this in the months and years to come.